three. Dagger! Good night, Augusta! Malik Bryant with the ball, holding it. 10 to shoot. 8 to shoot. 6 to shoot. 4 to shoot. 2 to shoot. Bryant, dagger! Good night, Columbus! I'll call it now! This is the Peach Baskets Podcast. I'm Mike Licio, along with Mike Licio III. This is episode 5, and we have a weekend of Peach Belt play that's been completed, so we figured why not have a special guest, somebody from the Kings of the Peach Belt Conference. Joining us is Robert DiClemente, the voice of the North Georgia Nighthawks. Robert, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I know we've been able to chat a little bit on Instagram over the last 6 months or so, but it's nice to finally be able to hop on a call with you and talk some PBC sports.
Absolutely love having you here, and obviously most people know me as the voice of Flagler softball, so we've had a lot of softball conversations. I will say that hopefully Flagler doesn't have to play North Georgia 7 times this year.
Yeah, I was about to say we definitely had our conversations and playing like 7 times over the during the regular season and then the PBC tournament and then regionals. We had a lot of Flagler going on over there and coming to Dahlonega. But no, it was great playing y'all over during the softball season, having a handful of times. I got a really good squad over there.
Yeah, Catherine Grant has done a great job of turning it around at Flagler. They had run through a couple of tough years, but looking forward to this year, looking forward to maybe challenging the Nighthawks. I know that's a tall order in softball, but maybe we can just wade in the pool this year is what I'm hoping. They don't rebuild in North Georgia. They just reload in softball for sure. Although I know we're kind of getting off on a tangent here, but we're here, so may as well. A new face leading the North Georgia softball program. How about that?
Yes, that was definitely a bit of surprise with Coach Davo leaving the program after quite some time. But like I said, we got some new faces in there with the softball program there at North Georgia, and I still think that we're gonna have a really good season this year with Coach O'Hare back. She's with the program now, and I still think that we're in for a really, really good season. Really, really exciting stuff coming up in February with the softball team still.
So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your involvement with North Georgia? Obviously, you're a student there, and you obviously, you're involved in everything in the athletic program. But go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about it.
So I am a senior, like Mike said, at the University of North Georgia. This is my 4th year working with North Georgia Athletics. And my first year back in 2021, I started out as a ball shagger. So on the sidelines of the soccer fields, I, was chasing around soccer balls and, throwing the ball back into, the players to make sure the flow of the game was going along. And I did a handful of jobs, probably like 7 or 8 different jobs over the course of the first year of working for the athletic department. A lot of shot clock for basketball and scoreboard and that sort of thing. And then our director of communications after my first year, he had taken a position somewhere else. And so he did a lot of our, pretty much all of our play-by-play broadcasting for UNG Athletics. So then when he ended up leaving, that opened up a spot for the students to kind of take over and take on a little bit more of a responsibility within the athletic department. And so an opportunity came up and I told them, hey, I'm, interested in doing play-by-play or doing anything, involved with broadcasting for the athletic department. And then so I started in the fall of 2022 with women's soccer, and definitely was not great. If you listen to some of those broadcasts from a couple of years ago, definitely not the probably greatest broadcast in the world that you'll listen to, but I'm still trying to get better each and every day. And even a few years later, still broadcasting for North Georgia, but there's still even today things that I like to work on. And I'm sure you know this probably better than anybody else broadcasting, is that there's always something that you feel like you can improve on after every game. I'm like, wow, like I probably could have done this a little bit better. I probably should have added this to the broadcast or something like that. And so even today, like I'm still trying to find ways to improve. But I've loved every second that I've been at North Georgia with their athletic department. They have some great administration over there. The bosses over there are as good as they are, and student staff that I work with is also just fantastic as well. A lot of people that I get to call, that I'm grateful to call my friends now through this job. It's really been incredible, really just a life-changing experience working for North Georgia.
And you do a great job, and I want you to know that for sure.
Thank you.
Uh, you know, I would say this: if you listen to that first game of the season with me doing the USC Buford Francis Marion game, I described it a lot like Ron Fadala would have described USC Buford's performance, about 35 minutes of what the heck are we doing out here, and then 5 minutes of awesomeness. So you got to take the small wins. It's like when I play golf. It's been a good day, but for sure it's a little bit of a struggle sometimes. So let's dive in. Let's pull up the standings here. No surprise to see who's at the top now that we actually have some Peach Belt Conference games. So we have obviously North Georgia and Columbus State, Flagler at the top, along with Beaufort and Lander. And then Augusta, Clayton, and Georgia Southwestern and Aiken all rounding out the bottom. Nothing really surprising here, I wouldn't think. Robert, what do you think early on as far as, I mean, we're only 1 week in, but, just seeing how the conference is kind of shaped up in the early weeks, what are your thoughts, especially on the Nighthawks who have found their way into the top 10 of the country?
I definitely think it's going to shape up to be a very competitive year in the PBC. I saw on, I think it was the last episode that you guys had recorded. You guys had talked about the PBC, and just top to bottom, it is just a super, super competitive conference. So once we get into the meat of PBC play, I think in January and February, then I think we'll kind of see these teams come into form, and we'll get a good idea of who they are. I know we've got a pretty good sample size right now. North Georgia, obviously, they've been off to a really, really good start to this year. I think that there were a lot of questions, I think, going into the year after, losing Frank Champion, him entering the transfer portal and going to Chattanooga. There were a lot of questions to see, who would kind of be the next man up on this team and who would step up. And I think that everybody has kind of individually taken a step forward in their game and rounded out this team really, really well. It's just a very well-balanced team. And I think any kind of game for North Georgia for men's basketball can really be anybody's night. Like it may be AJ White's night or Caden Charles or Zach Hawkinson, like in the last game. So really any given night, it could be anybody's game. And I think that North Georgia's been off to a really good start to this year.
And Frank Champion, I know, is one of my favorite players. That was a tough loss for North Georgia, losing an All-American player like Frank Champion, who are arguably in the last 5 or 6 years that I've been paying closer attention to the conference, he's definitely in the top 5, but you could argue is the best player in the conference over the last half decade.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. He was just such a well-rounded player too. Like you look at, because he's a big man and he obviously scores a lot of points, but he could also dish the ball really well. He rebounds, he plays defense, and so he was definitely a big loss, a big pickup for Chattanooga. And there were just a lot of question marks, like I said, going into this year, but especially like players like Caden Charles, I would say, have stepped up in a big way for this North Georgia team. He is somebody, I would say 2 years ago when he first started out, was more of a defense first kind of player. And then slowly but surely over the last couple of years, he's really taken his offense to another level. And this year, he is, tops on this North Georgia team and scoring right up there with AJ White. So he's really kind of filled in for that scoring that Frank Champion left behind, along with a couple other players, like I said, Zach Hawkinson as well, and Colin Turner taking a big leap forward this year as well, had a big leap forward at the end of last season too. And so they've definitely kind of made up, I think, for that loss of one of the best players in program history, I think.
Yeah, that's a tough guy to lose, but obviously North Georgia hasn't skipped a beat. Michael had to step away. He's having some technical issues, so we're working on that. But let's go into this week's game. So just quick recap quickly for everybody that Lander and Aiken 94-84 Flagler and Georgia Southwestern. Michael was at that game, so he'll definitely have some more input on that once he gets back on here. Flagler, I was going to be at that game. I had a high school game to cover. Columbus State, Georgia College. This is a sign of how competitive the conference is when we'll break that game down in a little bit as well. And because that was a game that I don't know that a lot of people expected to be that close, but along with that, also the North Georgia Clayton State game wasn't particularly expected to be close, I don't think, but I think that's a testament to the job Vince Alexander is doing in rebuilding that team in Morrow. So let's start there. We'll start with your game here. This North Georgia Clayton State game that was there, and there it is. I mean, you were there. North Georgia got everything they wanted from the Lakers, I think.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think, like you said, it was definitely, I think, a little bit of a closer game than they had anticipated, especially in that first half. The Lakers, they had 20 points off the bench in their first half, which is definitely, I think, took us a little bit by surprise. Both teams kind of got into foul trouble as the game kind of went along. 47, I think, combined fouls between the two teams. So it was just a lot of stoppage of clock. Definitely kind of dragged the game on a little bit. A couple Lakers players fouled out as well, but that kind of played into our favor, I think, getting into the foul game, because that put us at the free throw line a lot to ice the game. Went 6 for 6 in the final 40 seconds of that matchup. Nighthawks had 35 free throws in that game, went 24 for 35 from the line in that matchup. That's really been, I think, a strong suit for them all season long, has been drawing contact and getting to the line, because their three-point shooting has been good, but not tops in the PBC this year. I think they're actually towards the bottom echelon of the PBC as far as three-point attempts this season, but they're doing a really good job of just kind of putting their head down and, getting to the line and drawing contact. And we definitely saw that in that matchup. But Clayton State, they played a heck of a game as well to keep that one super, super close for, the majority of the game.
And they've had to turn over a lot of people down at Morrow. And, Aaron Pitts stepped up as he has all year. They're missing, I think one of the things they're missing is Eddie Page, their 6'9" big man that transferred from Columbus, because they were dominated on the boards by North Georgia. And really, I think this game was won in the paint. And obviously, you would know better than I would, but I felt like this game was won in the paint. And, Zach Hawkinson continues to be a force. I really thought that was the difference in the game.
Oh yeah, no, he had his best game as a Nighthawk. He had like career high 22 points in that game. It's his fourth double-digit scoring effort of the season. Like you mentioned, they won the game in the paint. He had 11 rebounds as well to round out that double-double. Then Caden Charles adding in 23 points. He had 9 rebounds, flirting with a double-double himself. This is a very good rebounding team. They don't have a lot of height necessarily. They're not the tallest team in the PBC. Now you got some big men on the team, of course, like Colin Turner, but they have, a handful of shorter players, I would say, on this North Georgia team, but they do a really good job of just hustling in there, getting into position and boxing out and being in the right place at the right time for the rebound.
And then on the other side, Clayton State plays a lot of defense. They aren't a very good three-point shooting team. At least they haven't been this year so far. And that seemed to be the bugaboo again. 63 combined free throws. How long was this game? This game probably ended like at midnight.
I was about to say forever. It definitely was a very very long game that kind of dragged on a little bit, especially towards the end when you're playing the foul game and just trying to stop the clock and put the other team at the line and fingers crossed for a miss. So definitely dragged on, but it was nice to see a North Georgia win. And also like the Lakers, you have that in your graphic. They are a team that just does not make very many mistakes. Only 8 turnovers, and then they force you into mistakes as well. 7 steals off of North Georgia, converting a lot of those into buckets as well. And so the Lakers played them really, really close. They're going to face off again in the regular season finale for North Georgia. And so I'll be interested to see how that one plays out back in the Convocation Center in Dahlonega.
And points off turnovers did keep the Lakers in. They outscored North Georgia 16-10 there. Michael, any thoughts on this game? I know you want to talk about North Georgia's upcoming game when we get to that, but any thoughts on this game? Oh, I forgot. I don't know if Michael, can we hear you? Well, I don't think we can hear him. The joys of technology. Well, he'll get it straightened out, and we can come back to that because we definitely need to hear his thoughts on the Flagler Georgia Southwestern game.
Y'all got me now?
We got you now, Michael.
Yes, sir.
North Georgia, Clayton State.
I mean, y'all summed it up pretty well. I mean, Caden Charles, great shooter and great rebound man. Aaron Pitts, great at everything. Very defensive game. I mean, y'all just summed it up great.
I'd like to see how this rematch is going to look when Christian Chambers comes back. I know he's out with a broken hand for Clayton State, but by then I think this is going to be, these teams will both look very differently by the time I think we get to their next match. That's at the end of the season. That's in February, correct, Robert?
Yep, regular season finale. Last game of the regular season is going to be North Georgia and Clayton State back at North Georgia. So it'll be a home game for North Georgia. So expect probably a lot of people to be at that game.
Now we'll take a look at Columbus State and Georgia College. This game kind of surprised me. I said last week I thought a lot of people were sleeping on Columbus State, and what we saw is they went up against one of the best defensive teams in the conference, along with Clayton State, and Georgia College gave them all they wanted. In fact, it was funny because Georgia College won all the hustle categories: second chance points, bench points, rebounds. They had more balanced scoring. They shot pretty well from the free throw line. They made the same amount of threes. They made Columbus play their game, but Columbus does what good teams do, and especially when you have a guy like Jared Adderton, they found a way to win the game. And Jared Adderton was the only Cougar in double figures, but he was my pick for Peach Belt Player of the Year, and he has not disappointed so far.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He, that was a statement game from him. It was, season high 30 points in that win for them. It was just a very back and forth game, but he had that game winning bucket with, around like 15 seconds left to go. And that's now 5 wins in a row for Columbus State. And they're led by Adderton, who's just been on a tear recently.
And you never want to face the hot team. And that is the team right now that obviously I would say there's a couple teams that are running pretty hot right now. The Nighthawks for one. USC Beaufort's off to a ripping hot start as well. But Jared Adderton, the Peach Belt Player of the Week, you see what he did there: 27 points, 6 rebounds. One of the top scorers in the country. None of this is really surprising to me, and I'm going to take a victory lap. He was my pick, but man, there's so many guys. I mean, even for you up in Dahlonega, you've got a couple guys there that could make a running at PBC Player of the Year. I feel pretty good about a guy from Flagler in Jalen Jordan, who's got a chance at it. I mean, the conference is wide open, and I think this Georgia College game was just another example of the depth of the conference.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Up and down, this conference is just incredibly, incredibly talented. And this last kind of few weeks or so has definitely belonged to Jared Adderton. He's definitely well deserving of that Player of the Week award. Wouldn't be surprised if he picks up a couple more along the way this season.
It's been really him and Jalen McCoy at Aiken, who also had a big game that we'll get to. They have been the class of the conference, and I think everybody else is they're 1A and 1B, and I don't think 2, 3, and 4 are too far behind, but I think Adderton and McCoy have been 1A and 1B. So let's get to this game, Michael. I know you were at this game. I couldn't be there. How is Flagler able to take care of Georgia Southwestern?
I mean, really, when it came down to it, it just came down to finding Jalen Jordan in the paint and getting Max Hardlick and Jack Spocknight open looks. That was the recipe for success last night. Jalen Jordan, 19-8, just adding to an amazing season so far. And then Jack Spocknight and Max Hardlicka both had 14 points on great shooting. Max Hardlicka 6 for 10, 4 for 6 for Jack Spocknight. But I want to talk about Lars Nielsen. I mean, he could most definitely win Conference Player of the Week this week because he picked up what Tim Hall kind of left. Because Tim Hall had somewhat of a quiet game scoring-wise, had 7 points, but, I mean, he had 11 rebounds, which obviously is not a very quiet game. But Lars Nielsen had 29 and 7 on 10 for 19 shooting, and 7 for 9 on the free throws. He picked up what he needed to do in this game.
And Lars Nielsen is a guy who I don't know a lot of people would have had Lars Nielsen as a guy that they thought could become one of the top players in the conference, but he has really emerged as one of those guys. Justin Mondin had a great game, and you expect that from him. And Tim Hall Jr. is a talented double machine. In fact, sometimes obviously I like to give myself props, but I had the key matchup here as being Tim Hall versus Jalen Jordan, and I think it's safe to say that Jalen won that matchup as the former Cane. This is a game that Georgia Southwestern is going to look back and wish they had, because Flagler comes in a very good free throw shooting team. They struggled at the free throw line. They were entering the weekend as the best 3-point shooting team in the conference, and that's what we saw from Flagler is they can shoot you out of a ball game. And if you're not shooting the ball well, and Georgia Southwestern definitely was not, it's going to be a long day. And then the Flagler bench stepped up. Blake Selland has done a great job of developing depth at Flagler, and we saw a lot of that. That was something we talked about last week as being a key to this game was, could Flagler get contributions from guys like Max Terlicka and Destin Clark and Jack Spocknight, and they were able to get help from all up and down the roster. I meant to ask you actually, Robert, about when we were at Columbus State. Did you guys have the hooting lady that used to hoot from Columbus State?
I don't think she was at that game. No, I don't remember her being there.
So there was a lady, and I'm assuming she's a Columbus State parent, and I don't know if she was a girl's parent or a boy's parent, but the entire game, every time somebody would shoot, she'd go hoot, hoot, hoot. And so her legacy lives on that. At least at Flagler games, every once in a while you get a random hoot, hoot, hoot from the crowd. And even when we were at Beaufort, Michael and I took a trip up to Beaufort, which we highly recommend if you get the chance. And the hooting lady was there.
So well, I'll say
if you missed out on that, I'm sorry. You missed out.
I definitely remember her making an appearance in Dahlonega at least once or twice for a North Georgia game. If it was a men's or women's game, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think remember hearing that during, I must have been doing like shot clock or something like that and hear that. And I just turn around and I'm like, what the, like that? I guess it worked because we ended up, I think missing like 1 or 2 of those free throws when she was there. But, PBC fans, they travel far and they travel well. So.
Absolutely. And we haven't made it quite as many places in the conference as we'd like, but we have been to Beaufort. We've been up to Christenberry Fieldhouse in Augusta. That is a great place to watch a game. I've only been able to watch on TV, but every single facility at North Georgia just looks absolutely spectacular. It's amazing the investment that university has put in their athletic programs. And you see the results, though. You see the results that they're championship caliber in just about every sport. What's it like working for that kind of program?
Oh, it's been spectacular, especially to see it kind of evolve over the last handful of years. It was just, I think, about a year and a half, 2 years ago or so that our convocation center got completely updated, and so we have the jumbotrons up above, and then we have the screens on the side as well. And like I said, our administration, they just do such a great job of providing just a fantastic both in venue experience. So for the fans who are able to make it out to Dahlonega, whether it's Glenn Cottrell Arena or it's Glenn Cottrell Park, any of our facilities out there for soccer, baseball, and softball, I think our administration just does a really good job of making sure that that experience is just as good as it can be for fans. And then on the broadcast side as well, we have our new director of communications who came in February of this year, Brendan Shabath. This is his first full year with the program, and he has just completely retooled the Nighthawk Sports Network and the broadcasts. And so the experience for fans watching games at home is also just a completely new and a much better experience than it had been in years past. And so we're experimenting a lot with different graphics and replays and all that sorts of stuff, different programs like vMix, along mixing that in with a production truck as well. And so it all just kind of goes back to the students who are working these games and making sure that these game days are possible and these productions are possible, but also the administration and all of their leadership that they provide for all the student workers to make sure that the experience is as great as possible for all the fans.
We're going to get up there at some point. I know. I don't know when. We're going to try and get up there. We were planning to go this winter, but then we have family that's coming into town. So, but we were planning on going when Flagler came to North Georgia at the turn of the year. We also made a trip to Greenwood. I don't know if you've ever been to Greenwood.
I don't think so.
It's a haul. It's a little bit of a haul. We'll leave it at that. It should have taken us about 6 hours. It took us about 8. It's a little bit of a haul, but great facilities there. They have a great softball facility too. And I'm partial to Flagler Field. It's always strange though when I'm so used to Flagler. I do the games in the stand. So when I'm in a press box for baseball or softball, it always feels so weird. It's like, oh, you feel like something's missing. But yeah, you guys do a great job, and I can't wait to see how much better it's going to look because it looks pretty good. You guys do. I always loved it in softball. You have the center field camera, which not a lot of teams have, which was also interesting for me watching it from that angle because I'm always looking from the other angle as well. We've got one more game here. We got USC, Aiken, and Lander, and we knew this game was going to be a battle. But one thing that Michael and I have talked about this year is how Aiken has struggled from the free throw line, and it was no different on Saturday afternoon. They struggled 14 of 22. They are one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the conference. But really, what it came down to is lockdown defense by Lander. They shut down Jalen McCoy. Davion Cunningham having 31 points, and Rajon Blackwell. They both stepped up, but it wasn't enough as Lander had a plan. That plan was to limit Jalen McCoy, and it worked.
Yeah,
Michael?
No doubt about it. Like that, holding him to 9 points is not an easy thing to do. I mean, you guys have talked about it, time and time again on this podcast, how good of a player. And I think anybody who watches the PBC or follows it knows how spectacular of a player he is. And so to hold him to single digit points, I don't think he scored until there was, like 10 to 12 minutes left in that second half of that game. Lander, like you mentioned perfectly, they just did a spectacular job of locking him down. They got some scoring from some other players on that team, like you mentioned, in Cunningham with 31 points, but still just to hold him under 10 points is really, really a good job by Lander.
Mm-hmm.
And then Noah Dunn, he continues to fly under the radar. Noah Dunn, he hasn't had that gaudy 30-point game yet, that big outpouring, but he seems to be between 18 and 24 points every night. They got a good night from Jeremiah Holiday and a good night from Tim Steele. This is a Lander team that there were high expectations for, and I think in the eyes of some, they've been kind of a disappointment. So this is a game I feel like the Bearcats really needed to show everybody that, we don't start playing basketball until conference season starts. So if you get off to a slow start, you can put that all behind you with a good conference showing. And they started off on the right foot. This is another game where I said the matchup of the two guards would be the key. Obviously, Dunn was the difference in that game, and holding McCoy to that is never easy.
I just want to mention real quick, Noah Dunn's doing all this while coming off the bench. He played 25 minutes and had 24 points. But it's an honor to be able to be in the presence of a bench guy like that.
The little guys, they sometimes they don't get enough credit off the bench, but obviously Noah Dunn is the sixth man in the conference. That's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up because that is a great point. He's not even starting, and he's doing this every night. In fact, the bench points were the difference in this game for sure. Aiken as a team only got 15 points off the bench, 54 for the Bearcats. I don't care who you have. Even if you have a guy like Jalen McCoy, if your bench is getting outscored 54 to 54 to 15, it's going to be a long night.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And that's probably an intentional decision made by Lander and their coaching staff, to say like, hey, like Noah, you could most definitely start for this team, because you're talented enough to start for this team. But if you come off the bench as our sixth man and go up against, these second units for all these other PBC teams, then, you're going to absolutely feast. And he's definitely shown that, I think, this year.
It reminds me a lot of J.R. Smith.
Yep.
Former New York Knicks great J.R. Smith. And because there was no reason J.R. Smith was probably at his peak better than, 15 to 20 starting shooting guards in the league, but that spark he provided off the bench. And I think teams do that, to your point, because sometimes you put that guy in the lineup, and now when you need that second unit to come in, there's a drop-off. You don't want that drop-off. You want to keep the pressure on a team, and having a guy like that off the bench gives them the ability to do that. So we've got a quiet week kind of coming up this week. I know North Georgia's got a couple of games here, but for the most part, we're kind of making our way into winter break, so not a lot of action. Flagler will be down in Winter Park at Rollins on Tuesday. But Michael, I know there was a game that you wanted to talk about from this Tuesday, and so I'm going to give you the floor, and I'm sure Robert will have some input on that game as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's the North Georgia Rogers State game. And North Georgia is one of the best teams in the country. And Rogers State just got a big win over D1 Oral Roberts. And anytime a D2 school knocks off a D1 school, it's awesome. And they got a bunch of star guys there. And to see them go up against this North Georgia Nighthawks team, it'll be a fun one.
That one actually on the road, Robert.
Yeah. There's the River City Classic that North Georgia is going to. That's going to be a huge test for them coming up next week. They got a couple of games that River City Classic against Rogers State and Central Missouri. And like Michael said, if you're a D2 school and you are able to take down a D1 school, it doesn't matter what sort of capacity it's in. That definitely establishes that D2 school as like, all right, we're not messing around. Like we're a real deal this year. And so it's going to be a big test for North Georgia. They've proven this year that they're able to pick up some big wins on the road. They took down the reigning national champions, Minnesota State, at the beginning of the year on the road in their second game of the season. And so it's going to be a big test for them. They're also going out to San Antonio to play in those games in the River City Classic. And so, playing in, that sort of environment at the River City Classic, I think is going to be really, really cool to see.
Now on this, there is one game missing from the graphic actually on Wednesday of next week. It might be Thursday actually of next week, but we'll have another Peach Belt matchup. The two teams that were not in action this week, USC Beaufort and Augusta. It'll be Columbia County classroom day, as they'll have students from Columbia County in the greater Augusta area for the game against Beaufort. Both those teams have been surprises this year. I want to kind of touch on that before we get out of here. Both those teams have kind of been surprises. Augusta off to a slow start. They've now won 4 in a row. They've righted the ship. And then in the second year, Ron Padala and the USC Beaufort Sand Sharks at 8-1. I don't want to put Augusta on upset alert for sure, because they are Augusta and Dip Metris is going to always figure it out. But that's a game that if you have some time in the office next week, and I'm not going to say that I do or I don't, I would never waste valuable work time watching basketball, but I might have an eye or an ear on that game.
Yeah, that's going to be a heck of a game. Augusta, ever since they came into the PBC, they've established themselves as a real deal team, one of the highest scoring teams in the PBC last season. So that's definitely, I think, going to be, or USC Beaufort, I should say, USC Beaufort, one of the highest scoring teams in the PBC after joining last season. But like you said, Augusta is always going to be Augusta. They are going to be a hard team to beat, no matter the day, no matter the year. And so that's going to be a heck of a game, I think.
Yeah, you can never sleep on the Jaguars. I've said this before on the podcast, but I always like to bring it up that my favorite professor in college was Dr. Coyle. She was a comp teacher. She actually played basketball at Augusta when it was Augusta State back in a magical time called the 80s. Dr. Coyle played center for Augusta, and I always think about her when I head up to Augusta or when the Jaguars come to town. I do want one more humble brag. That clip you see in the opening credits, that was against Augusta. Flagler went on a winning streak that lasted until the Final Four after that game. So maybe there is a little magic sometimes for me. I wish it would come over to high school football. Robert, you gotten to do any football?
Unfortunately, North Georgia, they are one of the few Division II schools that does not have a football team. So I haven't gotten to do any broadcasting for North Georgia football. It's actually funny. The North Georgia bookstore, they used to carry a bunch of t-shirts that said UNG football on the front. And then if you flip it to the back, it says still undefeated.
Yeah, we've got those at Flagler too, for sure. There's got to be a high school you could tag along somewhere. But I was going to tell you, I am currently 0-14 all time as a football announcer in the playoffs. So.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And the last 2 games, the team I was calling the game for blew 28-6 leads. So,
well, I was gonna say on the bright side, you're famous now on social media for that infamous missed down call. So
you saw
there's nothing to come out of it.
Thank you, John Boy Media. That had 240,000 views. Yeah. I was actually covering a high school soccer game last night, which is why I appreciate you rescheduling. And one of the officials came over to check my badge to see why I was on the sideline, and the soccer coach says he only yells at football referees. You're fine. So my reputation does precede me. Michael, do you have anything to say before we get out of here?
I got just one question for you, Robert. What's a North Georgia What's a Dahlonega winter like?
Oh, it definitely gets a little bit chillier up there compared to, I guess, other parts of the state. Like I'm back home in Woodstock right now for Christmas break, and it definitely, I got a lot of heavy coats up there. I would say we haven't had too much snow. Like we've only had one really heavy snow since I've been up there as a student, but it definitely gets a little chilly in the morning. I think definitely maybe a little bit colder than it does down south or down in Florida. I will say though, they do a really good job of decorating the town here for Christmas. And so if you guys do end up coming to visit, come up to Dahlonega, definitely got to come during November, December when they decorate the town for Christmas. They have horse carriages going around the town and just lights everywhere. And so combining that with kind of the cold temperatures and walking around, it's like walking around in a Hallmark movie almost. It's like just a wild sort of experience.
And I've heard it's a beautiful mountain town. What brought you to Dahlonega? What made you choose the University of North Georgia?
So I, out of college, initially had gone to my first year was at Kennesaw State University, which is a Division I school here in Georgia, and I had gone there 2020, 2021, and so a lot of COVID protocols still in place, and I commuted from home. Then I had a friend, Miles, who was going to North Georgia. He's a year behind me, so he was graduated from high school in 2021. And he said, yeah, I'm going to North Georgia. And not a lot of people from my high school went to North Georgia. A lot of them went to Kennesaw State or UGA or some other schools. And he said, I'm going to North Georgia. You should come up here and check it out. And so I ended up doing a sort of off the clock campus tour with him. He just kind of showed me around the campus, and immediately I was just drawn into the atmosphere, and just being up in that little mountain town was just a super cool experience. And so I ended up transferring there because it's about an hour and 15 away from Woodstock. So it's far enough from home to where I have some sort of independence, but still enough to be like, all right, I kind of want to go home for the weekend, and go see family. And so it was far enough away and close enough away. I felt like it was the perfect distance compared to Kennesaw State, which is only 10 minutes up the road from where I live. But it's definitely, it's been I think just a fantastic decision for me and my situation.
This might surprise you, but not a lot of people I went to high school with went to North Georgia either. But I've heard nothing but great things, and it seems like it's been a great experience for you. We have a friend that goes to Valdosta, a family friend, and Valdosta's about 2 hours away, and he's home just about every weekend. So there's something nice about being able to get out on your own, but also being able to come home whenever you want. And I'm sure your family is glad to see you as well.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. They will welcome me with open arms every time I, phone them up and I tell them I'm on the way home. And so it definitely is nice to have sort of that perfect balance between, going home and seeing them and also being at school and having my, my own life up there, up in the mountains and with athletics.
Well, Robert, we appreciate you joining us. This has been episode 5 of the Peach Baskets podcast for Mike Licio III and Robert DiClemente. I am Mike Licio. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the games.